Alright guys, today's video is going to be fun. As many of you know, I've been looking on Craigslist for a short-term apartment rental, and the reason that I want something month-to-month, something short-term, something on the cheap, is I want time to figure out what my next move is because I'm potentially thinking about something longer-term. What I'm doing today is going to a bunch of open houses. I just want to see what's out there as far as buying, and I figured this would be a solid opportunity to talk to you about renting versus buying. Now, the primary reason I want to do this, not because I'm an expert, not because I know everything, I think I offer a unique point of view because I think most people make this decision based on societal pressure, social pressure, pressure from parents, and the perception that ownership is status. And while buying often makes sense, for a lot of people it often doesn't. And that's what I want to talk about. Especially for you younger guys and girls. I'd really appreciate if you watch. I know it's going to be a little bit of a longer video, but I have quite a few thoughts on this. Again, not an expert, but you know how I feel about degrees. I'm a CPA and I'm an awful accountant. Alright, first things first, I think it makes sense to talk about what the difference is. When you're renting, you generally sign a contract saying that you pay an expense per month to live in a place that someone else owns. When you buy something, you are taking generally 99% of the time, you're taking a loan from a bank so that you can pay for a house. Now, you put down what's called a down payment. Generally right now, that's about 20% of the cost. So if you're buying something that's $200,000, which sounds huge, you have to put down a down payment, which is also a really big number, of $40,000, and then the other $160,000 is coming from a loan from a bank for generally 30 years that you're gonna pay a monthly fee over time. Now, the bare bones argument is buying's better because you have equity, meaning that when you make a rent payment, you're never gonna see that money again. But say, for a very basic example, say you buy a place and you live there for 1 year and then you sell it. That's probably not what you're gonna do, but, and we'll get into why that's a bad idea in a second. But pretend that the monthly payment is $1,000. I'm just making up numbers right now. So if you were paying $1,000 a month in rent, you're not gonna see that 12K again. If you buy something and then sell it a year later and like somehow you sell it for the exact same price, hypothetical, you're gonna end up getting that 12K back. However, we need to consider hidden costs to buying that don't exist when you're renting. One of those being the time and energy, because like we all have a life hourly, so investing time and energy into the buying and selling process are both like infinitely more than into the decision to rent or not to. Another thing to consider is you're taking on risk of change in value when buying that you don't take on when renting. And what that means is you buy a place for $200,000, when you sell it, you might end up selling it for $220K and making $20,000, or you might end up selling it for $180K, depending on a number of factors like macroeconomic factors, neighborhood factors, like just what someone is willing to pay for that property at the time that you want or need to sell it. One big upside to renting, if you're like a hustler or grinder like me, is flexibility and liquidity. Meaning, if you come up with the money for a down payment but decide to rent instead, you can use all that extra cash to invest in your grind, to invest in ad spend, to invest in employees, to invest in like anything business related. That's the liquidity component. The flexibility component is if I'm renting somewhere, and rent contracts are almost never more than a year, but you can go somewhere else, you can do somewhere else. It's like much easier to break or find a way out of a lease than to figure out a plan if you want to move from Chicago to New York City because an opportunity popped up and you own property because you bought when you were 24 because like you saw your friends buying and thought that was cool and like wanted to post a cool picture on Facebook that would get a lot of likes next to that sign. Like, just aren't good reasons. Now, if you know like for certain that you want to be in the same city for an extended period of time, then it makes sense. And that period of time varies from person to person. Maybe it's 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, like what the minimum is, where, okay, buying makes sense in this situation. Because the longer you stay there, the more you're reducing the risk of depreciation of the house, the property, like losing money on the transaction. You're also increasing the amount of, like, over time you're gonna have to make more payments, and if you know it's gonna be 7 years and you want to be in the same place, getting back 7 years of equity versus like losing 7 years on rent, just way more money. But knowing you want to be in the same city for an extended period of time removes that one major upside of rent, which is the flexibility. Something else to consider that isn't like a huge factor but is relevant is upkeep. So like lawn and like painting and like projects, and I don't even know all the projects people do to their houses, but those require a lot of time. Think about your life hourly, time is money, like that is a cost that doesn't exist when renting. Also, it kind of exists if you're buying a non-house. If you're buying a condo or you're buying something where you have a superintendent, you have someone who can like do these things for you, you pay a maintenance fee for it, so it still is, but you get that time back. So if you value your time super highly, and whether that's because you can actually make money with your time, or because in the future you know you will, or if you just value your time highly because like the things that you like to do with your time are very important to you, that's like a marginal piece of the decision-making process. What's up? Saw a bunch of places today, 7 of them. My broker Jack is very impressed with my independence and hustle on open house Sundays, he says. But I want to get a feel for prices and like what you get for your dollar in different neighborhoods around the city. So I'll spend a few Sundays, you know, spending 2.5, 3 hours banging these out. But yeah, just like real quick recap. And again, I am talking about this not from a real estate perspective, but from a personal finance perspective, which is something that I think I just naturally like have spent a lot of hours in my life thinking about, and is something I have an advantage in just inherently because of the way my brain works. That's why I think that there's value in me sharing my thoughts on this topic. If you know you're gonna be in the same city for an extended period of time, at least several years, and you have money for a down payment that you don't think you're gonna need for something else, buying probably makes sense. But if you're buying for a lot of the reasons I mentioned earlier, which when we say them out loud sound like really dumb reasons to make a huge financial decision, let's not act on those as drivers. The upside of rent, flexibility, and liquidity. So being able to move city to city seamlessly, and being able to do something else to enhance your life in any way with the money you would be committing to the down payment. Appreciate you guys watching. We'll see you in tomorrow's video.